There are cases in a detective's career that leave an indelible mark, not just for their brutality, but for the chilling way they expose the darkness hidden beneath a facade of normalcy, often within the supposed sanctuary of a family. The delegate often reflected on this particular investigation because it starkly illustrated how trust, once broken, could curdle into the most profound form of torment. It began, as many deceptions do, under the guise of compassion. A young woman, recently widowed and overwhelmed by grief, was taken in by her father-in-law. To the outside world, it was a picture of familial duty, a supportive gesture in a time of immense sorrow. The delegate and his team, however, were about to peel back the layers of this carefully constructed image to find a horrifying reality, a daily existence of abuse and control meticulously concealed. He sensed, even in those initial moments when the first report landed on his desk, that this case would unravel to reveal something deeply unsettling about the hidden fractures within a family and the terrifying ease with which a predator can wear the mask of a protector. Her name was Eleanor, young, barely in her late 20s, and thrust into the desolate landscape of widowhood after her husband, David, succumbed to a sudden aggressive illness. The delegate often found himself revisiting the chronology of this case, how the early days, as described later, were cloaked in a deceptive sorrow. David's father, Arthur, a man of some standing in their tight-knit community, himself a widower, extended what appeared to be a lifeline. He offered Elena refuge in his large, somewhat secluded house on the outskirts of town. To anyone looking in, it was the epitome of familial duty, a pillar of support for a young woman adrift in grief. The delegate recalled how these arrangements, born of tragedy, can sometimes curdle into something far more sinister. In those initial weeks, Arthur was the picture of paternal concern. He shared in her grief, offered quiet companionship, and managed the practicalities that Eleanor in her shattered state couldn't face. She, in turn, felt a profound sense of gratitude, a small flicker of security in a world that had just been violently upended. The delegate knew this stage well. The victim, vulnerable and disoriented, often mistakes control for care, possession for protection. The house, initially a haven, gradually began to feel different. Arthur's attentiveness, once a comfort, started to carry a different weight. He'd comment on her choices, subtly steer her conversations, and express quiet disapproval if she sought to reconnect with her own life, her own friends. These were not overt acts of aggression, not yet. They were the careful, calculated steps of a predator grooming his prey, isolating her under the guise of concern. The delegate reflected on how the most dangerous manipulators are those who weave their webs with threads of apparent kindness. Eleanor, still submerged in her mourning, felt a growing, unspoken tension, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the house, but the true nature of the storm gathering around her was yet to be revealed. Little did the investigators know at that point, the quiet suburban street was hiding a secret far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The shift was insidious, almost imperceptible at first. The delegate often noted how abusers are masters of gradual escalation. Arthur's suggestions became directives, his concerns morphed into criticisms. Elena's attempts to maintain contact with her friends were met with thinly veiled accusations of disrespect towards David's memory, or worse, implications that she was moving on too quickly. The delegates' team, when they eventually pieced together the timeline, saw a classic pattern of isolation. Arthur began to control her finances, claiming he was merely helping her manage during a difficult time. He would intercept her mail, screen her calls. The large house, once a symbol of refuge, became her prison, its walls echoing with his subtle, constant undermining of her confidence and her sanity. To the outside world, Arthur remained the grieving father-in-law, the benevolent caregiver. He was active in local charities, always had a pleasant word for neighbors, and spoke of Elena with such tender concern. This duality, the delegate knew, was the abuser's most potent weapon. It created a shield of respectability that was almost impenetrable. Who would believe that such a man, so kind, so generous, could be capable of such cruelty? Eleanor herself struggled with this. Was she imagining things? Was grief twisting her perceptions? The delegate had seen this self-doubt cripple victims before. Arthur's psychological warfare was relentless. He would twist her words, deny her experiences, making her question her own memory. The emotional abuse began to be punctuated by moments of terrifying rage, quickly followed by feigned remorse, and declarations of his love and concern for her, further confusing and trapping her. The delegate and his investigators would later learn from Elena's fragmented accounts how Arthur's control extended to every facet of her life. He dictated what she wore, what she ate, when she slept. The pretense of paternal care had completely dissolved within the confines of the house, replaced by an oppressive, proprietary ownership. He began to make inappropriate comments, his gaze lingering in ways that made her skin crawl. The fear was constant now, a cold knot in her stomach. She was walking on eggshells, desperate to avoid triggering his anger, yet increasingly aware that she was losing herself, piece by piece. The delegate often pondered the terrifying skill with which such men compartmentalize their lives, presenting one face to the world and another, monstrous one, to their victim in private. Arthur was a pillar of his community, but behind closed doors, he was a tyrant, slowly, systematically dismantling Elena's will to resist. If you also believe that no crime goes unpunished, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any archived cases. Your support is crucial. The case landed on the delegate's desk, not with a bang but with a whisper, a desperate, almost inaudible plea. It was a call to a domestic violence hotline, brief, choked with fear, and quickly disconnected. The caller hadn't given a name, only a fragmented address and a plea for help from someone she referred to as him. The delegate knew these calls were the hardest, a victim reaching out, terrified, then retreating back into the shadows. But the hotline operator, experienced and astute, had noted the raw terror in the woman's voice and managed to get enough of the address to warrant a welfare check. That address led them to Arthur's well-kept home. The initial visit by uniformed officers was, as expected, met with Arthur's practiced charm and concern. He explained that Eleanor, his daughter-in-law, was still deeply grieving and sometimes became confused and overwrought. He presented himself as patient and understanding. Eleanor was briefly seen. She appeared pale and withdrawn, echoing Arthur's assertions that she was just having a difficult day. The officers left, noting no immediate signs of distress, but one of the younger officers had a nagging feeling. The delegate remembered that officer, Officer Miller, later mentioning Elena's eyes, a flicker of something that didn't match her placid words. It was the kind of detail that experienced investigators learned to trust. The delegate decided to assign a plainclothes detective, a woman named Sophia, to make a more discreet follow-up. Sophia, posing as a representative from a grief counseling service Arthur had supposedly contacted for Elena, managed to gain entry. The delegate knew that in these situations, a softer approach, a female presence, could sometimes open doors that official uniforms could not. Inside, Sophia observed the oppressive neatness of the house, the lack of any personal touches belonging to Elena, and Arthur's constant hovering presence. During a brief moment alone with Elena, while Arthur was fetching some tea, Sophia saw the facade crack. Elena's hand trembled as she subtly gestured towards a small, almost hidden bruise on her arm, her eyes pleading. It was a fleeting, silent communication, but it was enough. Sophia's report landed on the delegate's desk with a red flag. The subtle signs, the controlled environment, Elena's palpable fear, it all painted a picture far removed from Arthur's benevolent portrayal. The delegate authorized surveillance. His team began digging into Arthur's background, looking for any cracks in his respectable veneer. They spoke to neighbors again, this time with more pointed questions. Some recalled Eleanor looking increasingly gaunt and isolated, but had dismissed it as grief. Others mentioned Arthur's temper, quickly smoothed over but noted nonetheless. The delegate reflected on how communities can be complicit through silence, often misinterpreting signs of abuse as private family matters. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing mosaic, but they still lacked the concrete evidence, the undeniable proof that would allow them to breach Arthur's fortress and truly reach Elena. Mal sabíamos nós que a chave para o mistério estava o tempo todo debaixo de nossos narizes. The turning point came from an unexpected source. The delegates' team, while reviewing Arthur's financials as part of their background check, noticed a series of regular small cash withdrawals from an account he rarely used. It wasn't much, but the pattern was consistent. Cross-referencing these with local pharmacy records, they found a corresponding pattern of purchases for over-the-counter sleeping aids, always bought with cash, always from different pharmacies to avoid suspicion. This, on its own, wasn't a crime. But combined with Elena's withdrawn state and Sophia's observations, it raised a sinister possibility. The delegate considered the implications. Was Arthur sedating Elena to maintain control, or worse? The team needed more. They obtained a warrant for discreet surveillance of the house's exterior and, crucially, for access to trash collection. The delegate knew this was often where the carefully constructed facade of a criminal began to crumble, and crumble it did. Among the refuse, they found discarded packaging for stronger, prescription-only sedatives, not prescribed to Arthur. They also found small, torn scraps of paper. Pieced together painstakingly in the lab, they formed fragments of notes written in a shaky, desperate hand. "He watches me," read one. "Can't leave," said another. And the most chilling, "Help me." These were Elena's cries, never meant to be found, discarded in fear. The delegate now had enough to escalate. They needed to get Elena out, and they needed her testimony. The plan was delicate. They couldn't risk alerting Arthur. Sophia, using her established cover as a grief counselor, scheduled another session with Elena. This time, 2 other plainclothes officers were positioned nearby. The delegate recalled the tension in the station as they waited for Sophia's signal. During the session, when Arthur was momentarily distracted by a staged phone call arranged by the team, Sophia passed Elena a small pre-written note. "We know. We can help. Are you ready?" Elena's eyes, filled with a mixture of terror and a dawning, fragile hope, met Sophia's. She gave the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. That was the signal. As Sophia escorted Elena out, ostensibly for a breath of fresh air, the other officers moved in. Arthur, caught completely off guard, initially tried to maintain his composure, his voice booming with false concern for Elena's fragile state. But when the delegate himself stepped forward, presenting the evidence, the pharmacy records, the pieced-together notes, the initial reports of bruising, Arthur's mask began to slip. His eyes, once conveying paternal warmth, now glinted with a cold fury. The delegate observed the transformation, a chilling confirmation of the monster they had been hunting. What detail of this investigation shocked you the most? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I read all of them. The moment Elena was safely in a police vehicle, away from Arthur, the dam of her silence finally broke. The story she told, in hushed, terrified whispers at first, then with a growing, desperate strength, was far worse than they had imagined. The psychological torment, the isolation, the financial control, had escalated to physical and sexual abuse. Arthur, her deceased husband's father, the man who had promised to protect her, had become her daily tormentor. In the interrogation room, Arthur's demeanor shifted dramatically. The delegate had seen it countless times, the arrogant denial, then the attempts to twist the narrative, to paint Elena as unstable, as the one who was confused, even seductive. He tried to leverage his community standing, his reputation, but the evidence meticulously laid out by the delegate and his team was irrefutable. Elena's detailed testimony, corroborated by the physical evidence from the trash, the pharmacy records, and Sophia's observations, built an unshakable case. The delegate watched as Arthur's composure finally shattered, not into remorse, but into a bitter, resentful rage at being caught. He never admitted guilt, clinging to his twisted version of events until the very end. The arrest of Arthur sent shockwaves through the community. Disbelief was the initial reaction. How could this man, so respected, be capable of such heinous acts? The delegate remembered the whispers, the reluctance of some to accept the truth. It was a stark reminder of how effectively abusers can manipulate their public image. But as the details of the case emerged during pre-trial hearings, the community's perception began to shift from disbelief to horror and outrage. Elena, despite the immense trauma, found the strength to face him in court. The delegate often reflected on her courage. Supported by victim advocates and Detective Sophia, she delivered her testimony with a quiet dignity that left no doubt about the hell she had endured. The trial was grueling, but the prosecution, armed with the solid investigation led by the delegate's team, presented a compelling case. The defense tried to discredit Elena, to play on Arthur's reputation, but the weight of evidence was too great. The jury returned a guilty verdict on multiple counts, including aggravated assault, sexual battery, and false imprisonment. Arthur was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. The delegate recalled the moment the sentence was read. A palpable sense of relief, mixed with a profound sadness, filled the courtroom. Justice had been served, at least in the eyes of the law, but the scars Elena carried would last a lifetime. The delegate knew that true healing would be a long and arduous journey for her. Did you already suspect the real culprit? Tell me in the comments at what point your ficha caiu. The investigation team, particularly Sophia, remained in contact with Elena, ensuring she had access to all necessary support services. Seeing her slowly begin to reclaim her life, to find her voice again, was perhaps the most meaningful outcome for all involved. The delegate often reflected that cases like Elena's serve as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most respectable facades. Arthur, the grieving father-in-law, the community pillar, was a monster hiding in plain sight, his cruelty amplified by the betrayal of trust placed in him. This case underscored the insidious nature of familial abuse, how it isolates and silences victims, making escape seem impossible. It highlighted the critical importance of listening to those whispers of doubt, of looking beyond the surface, because sometimes the most desperate pleas for help are unspoken. The delegate knew that while the justice system can provide a measure of retribution, it cannot erase the trauma. Elena's journey to healing would be long, but her courage in speaking out, in confronting her abuser, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. He often thought about the fragility of appearances and the constant necessary vigilance required to protect the vulnerable. This case, like so many others, reinforced his belief that the pursuit of truth, however harrowing, is a fundamental duty. It also served as a somber lesson. Evil often wears a familiar face, and the deepest betrayals can come from those who vow to offer sanctuary. If stories like this make you think, share this video. Sometimes awareness is the first form of prevention, and don't forget to leave your like.